On Sunday night, reports started to leak out that UCF had identified Gus Malzahn as the top candidate for the job. Dennis Stoddard among those reporting. And then on Monday, the news made official Gus Malzahn will be the next head coach of the UCF Knights. The coaching carousel is now complete, so we'll be able to wrap that up with some coaching grades coming up for you soon. But for Gus Malzahn and UCF, there's I think there's two stories to this, because Gus Malzahn could have taken his buyout money from Auburn. He could have played golf. Like, I don't know if y'all saw, sure seems like he's been enjoying his time off here in at least the few initial weeks of just getting out there, playing some golf, living on that Auburn buyout money. But, you know, he also gets to take what I believe is one of the maybe 5 top group of 5 jobs in the sport, a job that might arguably be more attractive than some Power 5 jobs, at least with its ability to have some success. And so I think that those are the two things that I'm most interested in. But of course, I want to hear what angles stand out to you. Has UCF upgraded from Josh Heupel in this hire? Do you think that Gus Malzahn is a long-term answer for UCF? A lot of fun stuff to get to as a very, very successful SEC coach, at least in terms of win percentage, and having a SEC championship and a national championship game appearance. Now he is back in coaching. I guess, Bud, you've got the UCF friends on the neighborhood group chat, right? What's the buzz? And then I know that you've also got some sources back there around UCF. So do you think that this is being received well within the UCF community?
Yeah, it definitely is. If the group chat is to be the judge, they think they hit a home run. Obviously, like, he's been very successful at Auburn. Auburn is a pretty tough job relative to the expectations that they have there. The Gus Malzahn offensive genius is being thrown around a little bit. I don't know if Gus Malzahn is still an offensive genius, but I think the floor you get with Gus Malzahn, assuming he's motivated and actually wants to be at this and doesn't see it as just kind of a real temporary stop, is pretty high, right? Like, Gus Malzahn, he may not, reach the heights that Scott Frost reached, but I have a hard time seeing Gus Malzahn not work out there, because he's very competent as a coach. He knows what he's doing. I thought that they were going to look maybe at a Sean Lewis or perhaps at a Jeff Levy or Rhett Lashley. But Malzahn is certainly more proven than any of those guys are. Maybe not quite as exciting from a tempo, offense, spread it out, throw it all the time standpoint. And he, has really struggled developing quarterbacks over the last, decade or so. But the people down here seem pretty happy with this.
I think that if you just look at the hire, it's like, okay, well, we got Auburn's coach. And I think that on its own, it's a known name. There is somewhat of a pedigree. I agree. There's a high floor. But the one thing that's kind of confusing to me is, like, when Heupel left for Tennessee, a thing I heard from UCF fans was they weren't all that. A lot of them, it was kind of a similar situation to Harsin at Boise State, where some of them were kind of just like, yeah, no, we're fine with it. And the big reason was because Heupel's recruiting had dropped off in their eyes in the last few years. Like, UCF hadn't been recruiting at the same level as Cincinnati or even like Houston in the AAC. And isn't one of the reasons Auburn fans wanted rid of Gus Malzahn because he wasn't recruiting well enough?
Yeah, they at one point in this recruiting cycle, they had 0 recruits from Georgia. So it's like UCF fans are excited to hire a coach who was just partially fired because he wasn't recruiting well enough, and they were fine seeing their last coach go because he wasn't recruiting well enough, but they know the name. Yeah, I will say, look,
Auburn had some good classes.
It's had like top 15 classes.
Yeah, like 10. They were in that 10 to 15 range, right?
Yeah, it's just it wasn't good enough for what Auburn wanted and what you need to do in the SEC to compete for division titles and SEC titles. So it's like that whole weird kind of dichotomy of it.
But recruiting success at UCF, most reasonable UCF fans who I know, they don't think they're ever going to be pulling kids, not in the near future, from Miami, Florida State, right? Recruiting wins at UCF are, beating out a kid who Wisconsin's like, hey, we may or may not have room for you in this class. Getting some of those guys to stay in the state of Florida rather than going to, certainly Wisconsin doesn't fit this, but some northern kind of lower tier P5, beating Purdue out, right? Beating, Illinois out for a kid that comes, just because it's a P5 offer doesn't mean you have to go take it. Like that's the recruiting success at UCF. I think Gus can do that.
Yeah. And my other thing, like you mentioned, the development of quarterbacks, that is my one, because like, if you look at Auburn the last years, I think that's really what doomed Malzahn more than anything, is that his quarterbacks, for the most part, never really improved very much from when they would get there as they went along. Like Nick Marshall did, but other than that, I don't know who the developmental success story is for Gus Malzahn quarterbacks at Auburn. And I think that if I'm at UCF and I see that kind of what the success I've had with quarterbacks there in recent years, that would be a concern. Now, I don't want to come in here and be like, I think this is a bad hire, because I don't. I think it's a good hire for UCF, and I think it could work out very well for them. It's just, I don't see this as a home run hire. And I feel like a lot of the reaction I've seen and heard in the limited time since this stuff broke on Sunday night is that this is a home run hire. And I don't. I think I see this as just a solid hire.
I think it's a good hire. I thought both sides would be happy, but I do think there are some causes for concern. Recruiting may be one of them, but I would say, what type of offense are you going to run? I mean, is this going to fit Dillon Gabriel? Like, he's getting a pretty good quarterback, so the expectation is going to be, hey, we use that term, offensive genius. Like, this offense shouldn't see much drop off. You still should be top 10. They were top 3, I think, this year. They've been top 5 the last few years under Josh Heupel. Like, the expectation is going to be, this thing should just keep rolling. And like, I think it makes sense. I think it was for the new athletic director, for Terry Mohajir. I think it sells to the fan base. Like, it's an easy hire. And they had to go get somebody that was kind of big and splashy, I think. And it was probably the best option available. But I'm very curious to see how this works out. Like, I home run hire is a term I just can't use anymore, no matter what it is. I mean, and I'm guilty of using it with Danny White when he was hired as athletic director at Tennessee, because it did fit all the pieces. It's felt right. But who knows? Who knows how the heck that's going to work out? This one feels good, but I do think, and you look back over the success of this program, even George O'Leary mixed in 11-3, 12-1 seasons in there before Scott Frost went 13-0. So this is a fan base that probably is one of those, the ones we don't think about. We typically think about Florida and Ohio State and Auburn and Alabama as kind of unrealistic expectations of, we should be in the conference championship in the national title hunt every year. I think UCF fans are starting to feel like, hey, we should be in the playoff conversation every year. We should be in that top 8 discussion. And if they're not, like, I just wonder, like, mentioning that some UCF fans were kind of like, oh, good, we're on from Josh Heupel on to the next. You better be careful what you wish for.
Danny, one thing interesting that you mentioned about Dillon Gabriel, what UCF's been running now for a couple of years has largely been sort of that Baylor-ish system, right? You have receivers outside the numbers, the whole spitting on the sidelines thing. I do think that former high school coaches fraternity is fairly tight. And if you recall, I'm trying to remember the exact timeline on this, but wasn't one of the reasons why Auburn got Jarrett Stidham because Gus and Briles, knew each other? I don't want to imply any kind of endorsement, obviously, what happened at Baylor, but I remember when that whole thing and Gabriel transferred. So I wonder if he might not pick that coaching tree's brain a little bit for, hey, why do you guys do this? Why do you guys do that? Can he incorporate some of those existing elements in to his system and maybe kind of a little more slowly transition in his system? Because that is a pretty unique thing that UCF and Arkansas and formerly Baylor do.
And the book, literally the book that Gus wrote is, to me, again, I'm just saying the title, it's the Hurry Up, No Huddle. It's not necessarily specifically saying this putt-putt offense that we don't have a downfield passing attack for. That just might've been looking at the limitations of the quarterback you have or the offensive line that you've got where you feel like you've got to use misdirection. It is a tempo play that I associate with Gus Malzahn. It's just that Gus Malzahn put in practice seems like it is a step away from the UCF downfield passing attack. But I think that especially with a quarterback like Dylan Gabriel, it is unfair for me to apply some of that same slander that I put all on the Cover 3 podcast when I called Auburn a putt-putt offense that just used a bunch of gimmicks to hold things together while their defensive line dominated during the 2019 season. You know, I should not apply that moving forward to my expectations, but I mean, it's in my recent memory. I mean, is that one of those things where we have to look to Gus Malzahn and consider this an opportunity for him where he can show that he's got more wrinkles. He's got the ability to evolve. He's got, an opportunity here because the skill position talent that he's inheriting and the skill position talent that he should be able to recruit, it should be an open playbook in terms of what he's able to do with UCF offensively.
And that's another thing I'm wondering too. Is this a situation where Gus sees UCF as a very good job? Like it's Chip, you mentioned it's one of the top 5 group of 5 jobs. I would say it's top 2 or 3 at worst. Is Gus looking at this as like, hey, I could have just sat out and waited, but this is too good of an opportunity. I'm going to go to UCF and I'm just going to, chill there until I'm done chilling and then call it a career? Or is he going to UCF because he sees this as a chance to really quickly rehab his image and then jump back into a Power 5 gig?
I mean, Sam Pittman looking over his shoulder now, wait for Josh Heupel to get fired before the end of his first contract and for me to lose my bet to Bud on that one. I mean, like that UCF is a stepping stone. I mean, that's got to be a concern if you're a UCF fan, because if Gus Malzahn, if I was to crystal ball this, okay, side bets. Side bets. Over under years Gus Malzahn spends at UCF, 3.5.
Under.
Ooh, we got odds on this or just straight up?
I think we just got to go.
Set it at 2.5, honestly.
Yeah, I would have set it at 2.5.
Danny wants them at under 2.
What do you think, Bud?
Although there's a piece of me too, though, that wonders, like, if the shifting landscape of college football, if UCF actually got access to the playoff, however that comes about, whether it was expansion and they guarantee a group of 5 teams somehow where it's, you actually get a chance, then does that job become more attractive? If somehow there was conference realignment, it came Power 5, then I think it's a slam dunk. And then that's the scenario I think I talked about in the last podcast about Gary Patterson at TCU, where all of a sudden that becomes a great gig. Like it's a great gig if you're at UCF and you have access to the playoff. So if there's no change to the system and it's not in the horizon, I would take under 3.5 for sure.
I'm going to sit this one out. I'm hearing 2 unders and Chip's taking over, I guess, right?
I'm setting the line.
Okay, so both you got. All right, so Chip is not the house then. All right.
Yeah. In this particular one, I think as setting the line, I think that I get to be the house on this one.
All right, I'll mark it down. 2 under 3.5.
All right.
I got another question because Danny, you just mentioned it, and I've heard other people mention this in recent weeks and everything, like the possibility of conference realignment and UCF joining a Power 5 conference. Where does that talk come from? Am I just not paying any attention to like some secret backroom stuff? Because I've heard a lot of talk about the possibility, but I just haven't seen any actual evidence that we're going to see that kind of realignment at any point in the future.
Do you have
season?
Yeah, no, hold on. I think you could make an argument that history is what you're using, where if you trace college football back over the years, you don't go more than 8, 9 years without seeing some conference realignment. And I think that when we're starting to tick up on it being about 7, 8 years since that 2014 kind of wave. And hold on. Y'all ready to pick this one up? I'm about to drop it. I was having a conversation with former ACC Commissioner John Swofford one time. Ooh. And he put me in my place. He showed his experience and he said, look, there's conference realignment all the time. Just look back through the history of college sports. conferences dissolve, they realign, schools move around. It's just something that has happened frequently. Some of the reasons are political, some of the reasons are competitive, but the nature of conference realignment is not something that scares the leadership within college athletics just because it's been always going on. It doesn't happen every single year, but it certainly happens on some sort of revolving time as a circle, flat circle timetable.
Look, see, I look at conference realignment in the future, and I don't think of it as what we saw in 2014, where like, you know, the big conferences are just going to grab up some schools to get TV deals. I don't think that's what we're going to see, because I do think that with the likely expansion of the college football playoff from that angle, once the group of five kind of gets its, you know, spot at the table in that, I think that realignment's going to become less of a demand for schools like UCF or Houston or Boise State. Although I think Boise State is kind of done with the Mountain West in some ways, no matter what happens. But I think that conference realignment in the future is more going to be a complete shift in college football, in that we're going to see kind of like, you know, the bigger schools just form their own quote unquote league, not really realigned conferences. It's just like the Power Five is just going to completely separate from everybody else and go do its own thing.
But don't you think in that process, there are going to be some current Power Five schools that maybe don't get in, and the UCFs and Houstons and Cincinnati's of the world do get in, which that's what I'm like kind of looking forward to. If that's when, if you get that type of access, and that's the shift that you see, there's the Knight Commission that said they should do this already. There's all these major shifting landscape of name, image, and likeness, and the NCAA losing all this power. And there's going to be a shift, a massive shift in what college football looks like. It's just a matter of when it happens. Like, and we can say, well, there's 6 years left on the contract. I don't even know if we make it to the end of the college football playoff contract before seeing some of this shift. There's just, things are moving fast. It's been legally where the NCAA can't really do anything about it.
You can't break a contract, Andy. They're sacred.
That's right.
I mean, Big 12's got 10 teams. Like, if you want to start talking about like the most base level, like conference expansion, conference realignment, the first move in conference expansion is the Big 12, who, and I mean, had some lovey-dovey eyes for a little school in Tallahassee back when things were looking real uncertain for the ACC there for a hot second. You know, as Maryland's going to the Big Ten and Georgia Tech is supposedly sending some up text to Jim Delaney, and Big 12's like, yo, let's go get Florida State and Clemson. Like, Big 12's got 10 teams. If they want to go and fetch themselves a little Florida presence, I kind of can think of one school. Be pretty good, but we will see. So all in all, it sounds like we've got no one's going to go home run higher. We've got a feels good, and I like the feel test, Danny. I might start using that just sort of in all professional settings. Like, feels good, you know, just like a cozy little jacket.
That can get dangerous. So in a corporate setting.
Especially when we're talking about in Orlando. A solid hire, and then Bud, you know, seem pretty good hire. Is it an upgrade from Josh Heupel?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. I think, yeah, I'm going to say upgrade from Josh Heupel. Gus Malzahn back in action. Very, very excited about that.